pass the ball, it would be great. Nice to be back.
Yeah, I already.
You
You
already
should.
did. Okay, thank you. Um, so just it's nice to be back. I mean, I've been here. I never disappeared, as some of the members might think. But I see that they're doing some wonderful stuff. I've supported to continue to support Lorraine and her team, and it's nice to see that they're doing good stuff there and continuing because after a long while, from 15 to 20 years, we were able to achieve gold for 2021, and hopefully they'll be able to get it again this year with the initiatives and the goals that they're able to achieve. So that was good. Like Nikolai said, I was with the virtual seminar. It was a trying time in the pandemic, and we had for the entire 2020, 2021, we had like 24 virtual meetings, and I was always there. So Nikolai, are you doing a recording of the session?
Yes, the recording is in progress.
Okay, you're doing both the video as well. Okay.
Yep.
Um, all right. So
Can you please share your screen?
I need to share my screen, and I'm trying to get this thing to go. So give me 1 second. I've been here for a little while. Share. I try to get it to. I want to share my screen here. Screen one, screen two. There. Is it shared now?
Starting. Yes. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good. So you got the screen, all right. And now I have to.
Yes, the screen is on.
Screen is on. Sorry about that. Let me just put this up here. Just give me a couple of minutes. Let's get going with this. Okay. So if you saw my initial abstract, we talked about standards and standardization. And this first slide here, we're talking about a shared vision for a better world. And the inset, I put a picture there of a wasp nest. These are successful and diverse group of insects of maybe tens of thousands in almost every country you can find them. And except I think for the polar regions, but everywhere you go, you see they build the nest the same. And if you're a structural engineer, you'll know that those hexagonal structures are a very thin wall, so perhaps one of the strongest that they are, and they maintain the wall thickness and they maintain those standards throughout. So we only need to look to nature when we start talking about standardization. And this is something how even in the insect world, I've chosen the insect world rather than the animal world, which we tend to think has more intelligent species. But there's another slant to this. They talk now about being delving with some quantum mechanics, but I don't want to get into that. And that's another interesting subject to go down the road. So 2 days from now, on Friday, is World Standards Day. That's on October the 14th. And World Standards Day is really paying a tribute to the collaborative efforts of thousands of these experts that we have worldwide. Um, we contribute to the development of voluntary technical standards at the international level, at the national level, and we play a part because we want to maintain the shared vision for a better world. So I want you all to celebrate this World Standards Day. And it's for this reason we chose this topic in the month of October, and it's just 2 days before World Standards Day. So standards for SDGs. You may have heard this terminology or this acronym SDG. And what it stands for is the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. There's 17 goals of the United Nations. And of the 17 goals, they would like to transform the world by 2030 by using these 17 goals. And in order to get this, standards need to be aligned to promote the Sustainable Development Goals, because the entire standard system is built on the premise of collaboration and the fact that we are stronger than the sum of our parts. You will notice I'm not going to be reading the slides in its entirety. I would also like to state that this is my take on the subject and my way of passing information on. Wherever I've taken I've given credence to like ISO. You'll see it's in italics on the slides as well. No copyright infringement is intended at any point in time. So these are the 17. I'm not going to go through the 17 sustainable goals. And Nikolai spoke briefly about myself. What I would like to just talk about briefly here is, as you can see, is to share some of the stuff that I've been doing as it relates to standard. I started in my early days in post-university as a standards officer at the GNBS, which is the Guyana National Bureau of Standards. And, we were promoting standards awareness. I was in charge of the, I remember one of the first standards we wrote was on toys and consumer goods. And I've worked across over the years in very many different roles across manufacturing, distribution, supply chain. And I've done roles in consulting, training, instructing. I instructed at Senecal College as well back in 2012, 2013 era. And I've held roles of senior manager. As Nikolai indicated, I'm the immediate past chair. I'm also deputy regional director with the ASQ Canada. And most importantly, in terms of standards and in terms of relevance to this presentation, I've worked as a subject matter expert collaborating with member countries and experts from all over the world, over 75 countries in total, but each standard, of course, has its own amount of countries that represent the ISO. And here's some, just kind of show you some snapshot of some of the things in Japan, recently in Vienna, at UNIDO, at Stockholm, and in Florida at Tech and many other international forums as well. So what I want to just talk about here briefly is look at standards. Let's talk about standards and sustainable development. This USB charging port, I don't know if many of you know it, but by 2024, they were voted 602 to 13 in the European Parliament to standardize this. And it's the first in the world that's designed the law is to design and standardize these charging ports. We're talking about a savings of 250 million, which is around 338 US of e-waste just brought about by obsolete hardware. So this is some of the kind of high level push you'll see. And I know Chaitanya is in the audience. He recently gave a very good paper on e-waste and sustainability. And I took this from the CBC News, so you can find it on the internet as well. So the objective, and I call it a discussion rather than a one-to-many. Unfortunately, we are not in a room. We are in a virtual environment here. But, I don't want to bore anybody on a Wednesday night. So all I'm talking about tonight is to give you some kind of an insight on development, how standards are developed, the types of standards, the relevance of standards, the applicability of standards, benefits, how you can interpret, how you can deploy these standards within your organization. And obviously, I can't go into many standards. I will probably use one or two examples just to bring my point across. And throughout the presentation, I will kind of talk a bit about some of my experience in the last 3 standards and what I'm still working on behalf of the Standards Council of Canada, representing Canada as technical expert on the ISO technical committees. I would also like to acknowledge Peter Merrill, who I've known through the ASQ Toronto section for over the past 2 decades. And he was the one who encouraged me onto volunteering into the standards and Mirror Committee, and then eventually onto the International Committee. So we need to take a step back. Let us look at the state of the world without getting into trying to get into scare tactics or anything. There's this concept of VUCA, as we call it, right? It's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. In these times, especially with the recent COVID, and it's still not over, we saw a lot of this really the times characterized by this sort of modus operandi, a lot of volatility. Volatility talks about, if you know from physics or science, we talk about rate of change. We talk about uncertainty. We don't know the impacts and the outcomes of what's going to happen. We talk about complexity. Complexity, in organizations, in processes, you have so many interdependencies. As you make things more complex, those interdependencies, as you make the interdependencies more, you get more complexity. So that's the sort of thing that you're dealing with. And then ambiguity is different. I mean, it's not uncertainty. It's you don't know, you lack the clarity. And the only way you can do this is by experimentation. So with this sort of VUCA or what we call this environment that we live in, it creates this need that we need to anticipate change. We need to influence the environment. I know one may say that you cannot influence the environment, but I'm talking about whatever ecosystem you are within your work, within a country, within the politics, within the interrelationships of all the things that you do. And you need to use that to make timely and informed decisions. And as we look at the supply chain specifically, we need to anticipate that and make those changes. So how do standards play a role? Standards provide that level playing field of communication that can create those flows and serve as a common language to meet the demands of globalization. So we hear a lot of things, a lot of words banting around, like globalization. And to me, if I were to talk about globalization, I would just think of just to put it in context, we're talking about the movements and exchanges of humans and goods and services and capital and technologies and even cultural practices all over the planet. We see this rapid movement. And one of the effects of the globalization, it increases these interactions at a rapid rate. And the interdependencies and the interrelationships, they become more and more complex. They are, of course, what we call, the impacts of globalization. And, there are two camps. Some say there's negative impact, some say there's positive impact. It depends on your paradigm. If you're in a less developed country or you're in the developed world, you may look at it as a negative in the developed world, but in the developing countries, you may look at it as a positive. However, from a standards perspective, and when we talk about sustainability of these and achieving these development goals or the SDGs, what we can say is with globalization, you're going to have increased emissions. So we will end up damaging this planet more than we had. For those of you who've been listening to the news recently, airlines are now have a new mandate to reduce emissions, which means they'll have to cut back on air travel unless they can find a way to reduce emissions significantly. And I think that is up to 2035. So the world is going to be changing. And, with globalization, we see habitat destruction because with cities and factories, they're all built. And then even with the transportation, just like, when we first started to sail around the world with the sailboats, intercontinental, across the globe, in the first wave of world economy and world trade, we always take with us invasive species, whether it's plants, whether it's animals, whether it's rodents, insects, and these, in fact, add to more ecological disaster. So that's what's happening with globalization. Hence, the need for standards that are aligned with sustainable development goals is become more and more important. And that is how we can limit and we can be able to achieve those SDGs. I did talk about, what some of the things we were going to be looking at, and we talk about world standards. This is by no means an exhaustive list, or it's just my way of looking at it. You can break these into categories, types, levels of applicability, but I just want to have a look at it the way I see it. So first of all, you've got different types of standards. You've got voluntary standards. What are voluntary standards? These are standards that you adopt. These are guidance documents. Like one of the best guidance documents for a quality management system is ISO 9004. It's a great document, and if you follow that, you get a total understanding of how a quality management system can work. Then you have your mandatory and regulatory standards, and these can be found in the food industry, can be found in regulations, in electrical regulations, gas regulations, what is required so that you can operate in a safe manner. And then there's a registration type standard. Now, I use the word registration. Some people use certification type. But if you look at the quality management system standard, and the reason we are in a quality organization, so this quality society here, and this is for this reason I'm using this as an example, because I think, we would all be comfortable with that. If you look at the registration type, what it means is this is done by third-party certification. So you have third-party bodies that are registered, that are audited by ISO, so that when you're given the ISO registration, it means that you're complying to that system. So that's the difference between voluntary, mandatory, and registration type. Then within those, here are some examples. Again, it's a very exhaustive list, but I just chose a couple. We got what's known as the MSS, or Management System Standards. You've got technical standards. Technical standards can be found in papers and things of how to do a specific procedure. You can find that especially in the world of chemistry. You can find them in the world of food and drug. You've got product standards. You've got guidelines. All these are different categories of standards that you have out there. And then of course, you have the levels of applicability. So you start at an organizational level. You can write a standard for your organization, and we all have organizational standards. And the idea is that is applicable to your organization alone. You can also have regional standards. Like in Canada, we've got standards in Montreal, we've got standards in Ontario. They could be embedded in different, I'm not speaking about law, I'm speaking about differences in the way of the application of certain procedures and certain things that we do. Then you've got the entire national, which is Canada as a whole, that incorporates all the regionals, and then international. One thing about applicability is you need to have alignment because we're speaking a common language. So if you're going to look at globalization and SDGs, your organizational standard, whatever you create, should be aligned throughout, all the way to your international standard. If not, you will no longer be a standard per se, because you would not be able to speak the language at the international level. Now, here are some examples again of standards bodies. We've got your ISO, which is international. You've got your CSA, which is national. You've got your ANSI, which is US national. You've got your ASTM, the American Society for Testing Material. You got your Society of Automotive Engineers. You got your, your IATF for the automotive. There's the action group. You got ASCME for boilers and pressure vessels, etc. So you have all these as examples to give you an idea of what all the world of standards you can find out there. So I want to take a pause here and start thinking about, let us look at not the test type standards or the technical standards, but let's look more at management system standards. So we've got in organizations several types of standards. You've got your QMS standards, which is quality management system standards. You've got your EMS, which is the environmental system management systems. You've got your safety standards, and examples of QMS would be your 9001. EMS would be like your 14001. Safety could be like your OHAS. Risk, you have your 3114971 for medical device. You get them to information, you start talking about ISO 27001, which is the IT cybersecurity standard that's just been published. You talk about social responsibility. And then on top of that, you have all your different types of AIAG, VDA, food and drug, pharmaceuticals. So it's how do you connect these standards? So one thing, if you're in an organization and you're talking about management system type standards, what they've done at the international level, they've created, and this used to be Annex Excel in the old days, but today we call it the harmonized level structure for a management system standard. And it starts off with 0 and it ends at 10. What this does is that you're going to have within your organization an integrated management system, which incorporates a QMS, a EMS, a safety, and a risk. Because when we start talking about the context of the organization, and for those of you who have been working with standards, most of your standards starts at 4. That's what we call the real essence of that standard, the real rubber, it starts to hit the road. So we look at the context of the organization. The context of an organization is pretty much based on its sort of it's pestle analysis, it's SWOT analysis. How do we consider the environment outside, and what is the context within which I operate? And then you would make it relevant specifically within that context and within your policies for your integrated management system to the QMS, CMS, safety, risk, etc. Leadership is pretty much the same. So now you can start to get an idea of how this harmonized level structure works. And of course, performance evaluation will incorporate different metrics that encompasses all of that. What is the benefit of doing this? You can have an audit which may be extended, but now you do not have to have 5 different audits because you've got so many different management standards within your company. So this is very important to understand about standards in interconnectivity, and also you connecting to other countries, doing business in globalization. And now I can add here the recent, well, it's not the registration type standard, this is what we're working on, but I can talk about the innovation management standard here as well. Now, why did I go down that path? I wanted you guys to understand clearly this whole standards development thing. If you have no idea about management system standards or standards, then you would not be able to understand why we need to go through this process of developing standards. So the work of preparing international standards, as I pointed out in the earlier slides, is done through technical committees, to international organizations, to governmental, non-governmental, which are in liaison with ISO. And every one of these organizations take part in the work. So to kick this off, like it starts off, it was known as an NWIP, or a new work item proposal. And that's a proposal that starts. And you need the support of all the participating member countries to sign off on that proposal. One of the most important things with this proposal, and this is where I want to link it back to what I was talking about earlier, is that the NWIP needs to be aligned to the SDGs, because you cannot do a business plan or a business case for a new work item proposal. Let's say I want to come up with a standard. I don't know. I want to come up with a new standard for whatever. I mean, something that is coming up new, that's become a fad. I need to align that with social development goals, the SDGs, so that we can see within those 17, the more that I can link my standard to those, the more popularity, the more acceptance. Well, I shouldn't use the word popularity. The more value, the more acceptance you will get at all the different participating members across the world of the 75 countries that I'm talking about. So once you get that NWIP approved, the next stage is called the working group experts. And at this, for me, I'm an SME at this point here. We create a working draft. So you create mirror committees within your country. You create these working draft. Then when you create the working draft, you send it among the other working groups, and then you ask for comments, and you might get about 287 comments line by line on each of the items you put in the working draft. But the working draft, if it's an MFS, and I'm going to talk just about MSS in this presentation, you need to follow, because I'm not doing like, you can do what's known as a technical standard, but I'm talking about an MSS, a management system type standard. You need to make sure that you follow the high level structure. So we start with a blank template, and it's like a house, and we're going to fill it with all the clause and the subclause. We send that out, we get feedback, then we go through item by item, the proposals, the changes, we agree, we disagree. It's a very iterative process. And after that, we move what's known as the CD stage, which is the committee draft stage. When we get a committee draft stage, we send it out again, and the committees, the various ISO committees, comment on it at the national level. And then from there, we get the comments again, and we have to do something known as consensus. Many of you know consensus, right? But when consensus don't work, this is when we invoke voting. And we invoke voting based on participating members. So at the committee stage, we start doing that, and we amend that draft, and it moves into what's known as the inquiry stage, which is the draft international standard. We send it all over the world to observing countries, participating countries, interested bodies, interested organizations. We send it all over for them to comment. And by then we might have about 500 comments. And at that stage, we have to go through all 500 comments. But the thing about it, we don't go backwards. Whatever we dealt with before, we keep moving forward. So we can only entertain new comments, right? Then we go to the FDIS of the FDIS is the final draft international standard. Then the SMEs are the working group. So for example, myself, I would be from NWIP, from WB, I would be all the way down to FDIS. Then we present it to the ISO Secretariat. When we present it to the ISO Secretariat, they go through it, they look for structure, they look for vocabulary, they look for content, they look for syntax, they look for grammar, they look for meaning of words, and they clean it up, and then they put it out there. And that's how the international standard is developed. So in summary, draft proposal, 75 member countries establish their working draft using SMEs or subject matter experts. These comments are then sent to the CD, the committee level, and for the comments at committee level is then reviewed. And then again, after that, the draft international standard is finished, and then the standard is published. So that's the kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. So technical committee structure. I need you to understand this. A technical committee, there's just an arbitrary number, like TC 176. So right now, if I form a new standard and it's approved on a NW, new work item program, they give me a number. It might be TC 575. So that's what it is. And then we come up with what's known as a series of standards. So TC 176 has been around for the longest while, and that is the ISO 9001. So they keep revising, they keep doing everything, and that's the 9001 series. TC 279 is the innovation management standard, and that's the 56,000 series that I'm working with. And if to give you an example, we create working groups for the series of standards. So for example, TC 279, there are 3 working groups, working group 1, 2, and 3, and each one of those working groups would have their own conveners. And the working groups would develop specific standards for the series. So for example, TC 279, work group 3, they were doing the idea management, which supported the innovation, the vocabulary standard, the strategic intelligence management standard, the one that I was in WG3 contributing to at the international level. The IP, or intellectual property management, there's also one called measurement, etc., etc. So to give you an idea, this is how the standard structures work. I was also on the mirror committee for TC 279 because you need a mirror committee. Why do you need a mirror committee? When you're developing the standard, one person who is representing as an SME to the working group internationally convenes locally or nationally, and gets input from everyone around the globe. So these are this is how the mirror, as we call it, the mirror committee would be represented on the international committee. So continuing on with that, just to give you guys scope, the TC 279 and P in blue, I put it on a world map here, and the O is the observing members. So as you can see, we've got for the innovation management standard, we have right now 61 participating members. So participating members, these are the comments we'll be dealing with. These are the people we meet at the plenaries, at the forums, at the international discussion where we try to hammer the standards out. And now we do it virtually as well. And you can notice that France is in blue. And the reason that France is in blue is because they're the ones who put forward the NWIP, the new work item proposal, back in 2011, and they got approved. And so they're the ones who are the convener, and they're really the secretariat is based in France. So we go to France because they're the conveners as well. So this is how it works, right? Now, participating members can vote. Observing members can provide input. So that's the difference. What is interesting here is when an international standard is finally developed, if your country, let's say, the ones that are gray are not even observing members, right? They don't even know what's going on around the world. But when they get into globalization, they will be, I wouldn't say the word imposed, but they will be expected, without even having a say in the first place, they will be expected to be working with these standards. So it's in your best interest, if you're in a national level, to have involvement, at least as an observing member. Then, of course, on the top left-hand side, I just gave some examples of what we call organizations that are in liaison. Why these are important? These are the ones that provide funding, and they become like the host for these sessions. So you see there you have UNIDO, UNESCO. UNIDO was in Vienna recently. You've got UNDP, World Bank, all these different participating. And I made some footnotes. When you're in a category B, you just want to be informed, but A, you are making an effective contribution. So here's TC279 status to give you a kind of an idea of what I was talking about the series. These are the standards that have been published, and I'm going to read them out. As you can see, the Strategic Intelligence Management Standard that I was working on as the SME, that's published in 2021. Also, the Innovation Management System, where I was on the American Committee in Canada, that was published in 2019. Currently, these are the work that we're doing. And you will notice that there are current stages here that are listed. So this is the one that is at preparatory stage right now, Innovation Management Standard. So there's a cross-reference. For example, if you go back to the previous slide, sorry. If you go back to, you see, for example, ISO TS. This TS means technical standard. So this one is just illustrative example. This helps the standard to flow. This is done by work group 2. It's a 30.92. What does that mean? 30.92, you come in this chart, it means that the committee draft was referred back to the committee because when it reached this stage, it was rejected. So they have to go back and work on it again. So they're at 30. We are still at proposal stage here for the ISO 56001. I'm spending time here because this idea here is to make you appreciate what is involved and why when you view a standard, you should look at it with a different set of eyes. Here is an example of a template that we use. As you can see, you've got the country, the line number, the clause, the subclause, and then underneath here, we would have like lines in the matrix. And how it works, we, on the right-hand side is an example of a draft that we came up with. We send it out. And if you don't like what you want, or you want to make a comment, you quote the, like, for example, you say Canada, line number 20. Look at this example here with the 8 operation. Clause 8, subclause 8.1, paragraph operation planning and control. Type of content, what kind of content are you making? Are you making a technical content? Are you making an administration content? Comment, you will put that there, and then you put the comments, and you will say, well, I feel that this sentence here, it does not meet this, and then you have to put a proposed change. Then the secretariat, which is the working group like ourselves, would sit and go line by line at each proposed change. This is why you have these line numbers here. One thing to note is that we talk about the HLS. You will notice that we maintain the HLS in blue because we really can't change those. So for example, the organization shall plan, implement, and control. This is in all the management standards. You will find the same wording. But we could add the word initiatives, structures, innovation opportunities. We can add those words. Then when you're dealing with this is very, very interesting. I mean, so some of you might say, wow, I don't even want to be involved in listening to this from 9 to 5, line by line. But it's a great and excellent learning opportunity. If you ever have the opportunity, or as a matter of fact, make the opportunity, get yourself involved in it. You need to know key concepts such as what is meant by shall and should and may and could, and what are the purposes for those notes at the bottom. And you need to understand the clause, the subclause, the addendum, the appendix. So you have to have all this knowledge. And when you're sitting there, you also have to maintain a team approach. You have to follow standard committee principles. In terms of discussion, in terms of consensus. So it's an excellent forum to be on. It's also exciting because there's lots of debate. Sometimes we could spend 15 minutes on one little paragraph like this because everybody, and what is nice to know, you listen to somebody out in South Africa, you listen to somebody in France, somebody in India, somebody in Japan, and they're talking the same thing, but they are saying it in a different way. And when they're considering language translations, so you can understand why I'm telling you. For me, it's a very great learning opportunity as well. So why am I detailing this? Why did I go into so much detail of the development? I did this because I want to create an awareness and an appreciation. because in Friday on the 14th of October, we're celebrating the efforts of collaboration, the efforts of these experts that put together this thing, and what is involved in a 4-year cycle or longer sometimes, because you saw in that thing it got rejected, it got sent back. So I want you to stop and think about it when you pick up a standard the next time. I want you to recognize that the input that you're reading from that came from across the globe, from the 75 member countries. You can understand, you need to understand why it was written in the way it was written, because it has to maintain that applicability to all participating countries. It sets that level playing field for all countries. You need how to understand the application. How will I apply this and create value in my organization or in my country or wherever I am? And you need to have clarity and remove ambiguity. So this is the reason I spend so much time trying to explain to you this whole standard development process. And hopefully you get an appreciation and awareness, because we're talking about experts and time. And this is all volunteer work. We don't get paid for it. I don't get paid for it. This is volunteer work. This is what this is. It's volunteer work. So, when you pick up a standard and you first gut feeling, I remember the first time I saw a standard, I go, wow, what's this? Who in their right mind starts to write things like this? It doesn't do me any good. It doesn't tell me what to do. But a standard is a high level document that tells you what needs to be done. So this is the reason why I spend the time, and hopefully you can appreciate it. You can celebrate with us on the 14th of October on World Standards Day for the collaborative effort of all the SMEs all around the world in different locations, different demographics, different economic viability, etc. And yet we participate and provide our input because we want to align to the sustainable development goals that are set for 2030 to make this world a better place. So let's briefly talk about a management system standard using ISO 9001 as an example. I don't think I would say the word fortunate, but I worked with 1994 version. I implemented that somewhere around 1999, just as it was about to go out, 98, 99. And then there was a 2000 version, then the 2008, and the 2015. And right now it's due for revamp. Why? Look at the cycles, right? Every 7, 8 years, we need to go back because these are dynamic things. The world is a changing place. The world is not static. Things are changing. We look at things differently. During the journey from 1994 to 2015 of ISO 9001, we moved from a prescriptive type standard, then to a systems type standard, and then today we are at a risk-based systems type standard. However, many people who have been around for this length of time mentally are still stuck in a prescriptive type mentality, and they don't see the standard as a risk-based system type standards. And I'm just saying from my observation as a consultant, and that's one of the things that I used to do, is to go into organizations and sit with them and make them embrace and understand what the 9001 or what 14971 or what risk management standards mean. Let's look at what it is. The current 2015 standard, and it used to be 8, but now it's 7. They call it the 7 principles of quality management. And if there's anything I want you to take away from this presentation today, is the 7 principles. You can find this on the internet. You can find this all over. You can find it at ISO.org. It's the first one. It's called the engagement of people. If you want to have a quality management system, you could do a doctorate, you could do whatever you want. You need to have these principles in any organization, the engagement of people. Customer focus. It doesn't mean the customer is always right. It means that whatever you do is focused on delivering value to the customer. Leadership needs to walk the talk. Leadership needs to set the vision. Leadership needs to be supportive. These are the things, these are the principles. It's a process approach. In any system, there are several processes, and each process has its own inputs and outputs and conversion. So we are looking at this from a systems thinking manner. Improvement. How do you improve? Because you are constantly changing. That's what it's based on. On the right-hand side, you see by what was originally the Deming cycle, but later on became known as the Durand cycle. It used to be PDSA, but now it's PDCA. whichever it is. The idea is in these four quadrants. It's about planning, executing something or doing it, checking or measuring it, then acting, and keep revolving until you get better and better. There's always a debate about continuous improvement versus continual improvement. I will not involve myself in that debate today, but there is a difference. That's all I'll leave it as. And I subscribe to continual improvement because continual improvement is incremental improvement, and it does things. You're supposed to do things. You're supposed to understand the effectiveness of what you're doing, and then you take it to the next incremental level and you keep going, and then the organization as a whole becomes better rather than being a continuous loop of continuous or so-called continuous improvement, and it's not linked to anything. So improvement, evidence-based decision-making. This used to be called a factual approach to decision-making, evidence-based. So they changed it to evidence-based because do not make decisions based on conjecture. We can use statistics, we can use data, we can use information, we can use anything, but we need to have evidence, evidence in audit. Something must be telling us that this event occurred. So we should have evidence-based decision making. And then the last one is relationship management. So this relationship management was changed. And the reason why we talk about relationship management, we're talking about inter-department, intra-department. We're talking about external to the organization. How do you manage your relationships within the organization, the interdependency? How do you manage those relationships? How does one process hand over to the next? So you want, for example, with suppliers, which is the old eight principles, a mutually beneficial relationship, which means it's mutually beneficial. So when you talk about relationship management, you need to be able to understand that this is a very important aspect of any quality management system. And it's for this reason we talk about engagement of people. So your takeaway from this here is standards, management system type standards are based on these. And this is a quality management system I use as an example. And that's what it's based on. It's not an audit and you fail and you get non-conformances and that. It's not that. This is what it's based on. And it was developed by experts across the world. And the reason it's written the way it's written is because it's like the Tower of Babel. We have to make one common language for everybody so everyone can understand what it means. And in a method of continual improvement, we go on 7 and 8 year cycles to make it better. And these standards are linked to the SDGs. So how do you get value? Let's discuss. I use the word discuss. If I were in your live audience, I would walk into the audience and do some feelers. You need to apply those principles. That's the most important thing. Apply those principles in your organization. You need to foster a continuous improvement. You need to integrate, and that's just one example I'm using of quality management. You need to integrate this into what I call a quality 4 approach. And what is quality 4? Quality 4 is basically people working in robust processes using technology as an enabler. It's not about technology, it's about people and processes, but you need technology. If you want to have data and you want to have evidence, you need to have technology that can manage big data. You need to be able to drive efficiency and effectiveness. We all know, do not confuse efficiency with effectiveness. Efficiency takes place at the rate in which you convert your inputs within your process in the conversion. That's your measure of efficiency. How good am I? How good is my machine? How good is the manpower? How good is the material conversion? Those are my efficiency. Effectiveness is when I measure across the system. My input, conversion, output. Am I getting and achieving the desired results? If I want a 0 ppm, am I getting the 0 ppm? That's your effectiveness. So employ system level thinking at a strategic level. When you look at an organization, look at it from a system standpoint. Understand quality assurance, understand quality control. Use quality control methodology to manage inputs, qualify your inputs, qualify your material, qualify your human resource, qualify all those resources so that you know that when you put those into the process, you will get good conversion and you will get a good product. Use quality control to monitor for variation. You are going to get variation. Variation exists in the process. Monitor and correct. To me, in my world, SPC is a checking device. It's not a quality assurance tool. It's a checking device because you check and then you bring it back into control. It's like driving a car on the highway. That's quality control. Car moves to the left, you bring it to the right. Moves to the right, you bring it to the left. That's quality control. You need to establish this continuous improvement mindset. Again, for me, I call it continual. Go back to the standard. Use the standard as a guide. If you want a good guide for quality, the 9000 series, use 9004. And lastly, to certify or not to certify. And why does the whole flavor of an organization change the minute you start to say, and now we're certified to ISO 9001, because you're now focusing on passing the audit. And then we hear people talk about ISO 9001 is a waste of time, that people have it, but they have no quality and all. But you cannot, you have to stop with your thinking. You have to think of why this is happening. It's the focus, it's the lack of understanding, it's the way in which it was applied, is the mindset of the prescriptive from 1994 that is still running through. And I'm telling you this because I went into organization and I was really surprised up to 5 years ago how people still talk about, oh, it's ISO. And then, yeah, we got the ISO police, you know, the ISO police on the left, and they're the ones who are going to be giving out tickets and non-conformance tickets. These are the ISO police. No, you got to the left is the blue, or, you know, I perhaps I'm dating myself, but I'm a Star Wars fan, and then hence I use Yoda. You got to be like Yoda. You got to be, you know, you got to be like this Jedi. You have to really, you have to be consultative in the organization. You have to understand change management. You have to understand every one of those things. So it's your choice. You want to stick with the mindset, go to the blue or go to the green. But the green is what I would recommend. So here are some suggestions I have. Get familiar with all your management system standards, whether it's environment, whether it's a QMS, whether it's a OHAS, whether it's a risk, whether it's 14971 or whether it's 31000. Apply the standards and understand the underlying principles on which they were developed. To me, certification to standard is secondary, or the second phase. You have to have that correct message in place. As professionals, as quality professionals, as management professionals, demystify the standard, reduce the complexity, don't go word for word. Auditors, what surprised me is that auditors were never, many of them, 95% of auditors are never involved in the development of standards. Yes, they become the authority on standards once it's implemented. They're the ones who will tell you that this is what was meant by this line and this is what was meant by that line. But they do not understand the intent when those members and the subject matter experts were sitting and debating and taking a word and putting another word and what it means and what it doesn't mean and adding a note. But now they're interpreting according to their own way. So you need to demystify it. It goes back to the basic fundamental steps of TDCA. And again, my suggestion, get involved. Don't sit and complain. Every little thing you do, you can contribute to change at the international level. You can contribute at the organization, national, international. Get involved. If you do not get involved, then all you're doing is complaining. You need to contribute. Here are the goals. I call it the lofty goals. I mean, these are fantastic goals when you look at it. For those of you who may have seen it for the first time, or most of you have seen it, think about it. No poverty by 2030, zero hunger by 2030, decent work and economic growth, life below water, climate action. Each one of these goals, this is the goal of the United Nations. Do your part. World Standards Day is the 14th. Celebrate it. Work towards your sustainable development goals. Celebrate the work of all the SMEs around the world that are contributing to this. This I took from Paul Auster, and again, credit to codefancy.com. You know, to leave the world a little better than you found it. That's the best you can do. Volunteer your time, give your time. Do what you can, rather than sit on the fence and just talk about these standards. I want you to have the awareness. I want you to understand how standards are developed. What is the input? What is the entire effort of 4 years of people sitting there and hammering out line by line by line until they come out with a document, which is not even done. It is over and over. It's iterative. You got to keep doing it every 6 years, every 5 years, every 4 years. So this is my message to you today. And I hope that it's a good preamble to World Standards Day. And I would really like you to get involved in promoting standards, helping us to achieve those sustainable development goals set by the United Nations. So that's it for me. There any feedback, any questions, any answer, comments, please give it to me, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. Okay. Any questions from the audience there?
Yeah, so there is a question. How does system approach differ from process approach?
Well, a system is made up of processes, right? And when I remember doing this at Seneca one day, I took a bag of marbles and I shook it together. You've got all these processes that are interacting within a system. And that's what systems thinking is. It is not linear. They interact in a non-linear fashion. But how do you manage your system? The only way to manage the system is not to manage the individual process. And if you read The Goal by Eli Goldratt, very good book. It's been around for 40 years, I think now. But it would tell you that you have to manage the interactions. If you want to optimize a system, you manage the interactions of the system of each one of those processes, because those processes make up the entire system. And that's how you manage. That's why a systems approach, a process approach. When they first came out with the 2008, they actually had 8. So they used to say do a systems approach, do a process approach. But they realized that in the upgrade, when they sat down back at the table, the experts said, well, wait a minute, process of systems, I mean, a system is made up of processes. So what are we really trying to split the hair for?
Thank you. There is another question. Is mutual-based customer-supplier relationship replaced? So mutual.
No, it's mutual beneficial relationship is not replaced. It's now covered by the overarching. If you look at my presentation here, it's now relationship management, right? So they have encompassed it. They say that we should not only talk about supplier to customer, because when we put it as supplier, we know that from the concept of quality, every interaction, there is always a supplier and a customer. We have internal customers, internal suppliers, external suppliers. So relationship management is managing the interaction between the various suppliers and the various customers.
Before I read the next question, I will right now launch the poll. So please take the poll. It's important information which we'll need from attendees. Desmond, expanded form of MSS standards. It's a question. Expanded form of
Management system standards, that's what it means. Sorry for the acronym. It means management system standards. So your management system standards, like if I go back to this slide, right? Where we look at the management system type standards, we're talking about your QMS. Let me move this poll off the screen. You're talking about your QMS, you're talking about your EMS, like 14,001, you're talking about 9,001, you're talking about OHA, 17,000, talking about risk, 31,000, 14971, the 27,001. Those are all management type standards. So if you were to pull up any of those standards, you will see that they follow the harmonized level structure. So when you pull it up, you'll see scope, normative references, terms and definitions, context of the organization. These are the headings. These are the 10 clauses. And then under these, you will see different subclauses.
There is a question in Q&A. For example, new standard is being proposed and technical team passed 3 drafts and the final draft stage in the final draft stage. Why it is not necessary member countries adopt new standards. Member country is the member of technical team.
Well, yes. Like, okay, so to answer your first question, as you can see here, abandon on the 98. If you get a 98 or you get a 99, it means that we withdraw the standard, right? That would actually, it works backwards. For example, when we first started the innovation management standard, it was a Spanish standard, which was a national standard already. So they saw that the international community was talking about an international standard. So they jumped on the bandwagon. So we used their standard, but then we pretty much park it away. So there is still some contention with the Spanish standard, whether they want to align their national standard to ISO or they want to just maintain ISO. So yes, you can. It's a very good point. You can use it as your national standard. Let me give you an example. I'm sitting on the CSA, Canadian Standards Association, technical committee for innovation management standard, and right now, how do you think? Well, how do you think we started off? How do you think we started off? We started off by taking the ISO standard that is already there, and we put it to the group. And because we have 4 or 5 technical experts, because I can show you how many working groups we have, what do you think happened? We all voted to adopt it. And so CSA says, okay, great. No, we'll just have a couple of meetings and we'll decide, a complete adoption rather, or, we would modify as necessary, whether we go to regional or national as applicable to our country. Now, just to give you kind of insight, and this is not proprietary information, we're working with ANSI, which is in the US. And one of the standards we're looking at is the intellectual property standard. So if we work with the US, this is one of the things that we're going to get funding for, because now what would happen is there's been a big collaboration between countries. I mean, think about it. You've got your innovation activities, you've got your intellectual property, you're dealing with a country, the US is cross-border. If you can all adhere to one standard, then it makes life easier. It's one standard method of communication. So we'll be looking at that collaboration versus the ISO for the innovation or for the IP standard, intellectual property. And again, CSA, it's all volunteer, guys. It's all volunteer work. I mean, I do the volunteer work there, the CSA, we do the volunteer work, the ISO, do the volunteer work with the ASQ Toronto section, and I'm really happy to see that they're taking off. Hopefully, like I said, I wish them the best to get the goal this year. I still have some vested interests. I'm still the immediate past chair and also a deputy regional director, but it's the volunteering time. It does take up a lot of your time, but depends on the state of time in your life and what you can do and what you can't do.
Thank you. So there is another question. Does the risk-based system type means design-oriented or process-oriented?
Well, I don't have the structure here, but I would tell the person who's asking the question to go to ISO 21000, and there's a model in there. And Chaitanya, I don't know if he's still around, but he also did quite a few presentations on risk 31000 and the Swiss cheese model. So it is both a process. When you look at the model, it is both a process which takes place at the high level, the strategic level, and then there's also the product. So you have to understand that this is how it works. Your organization as a whole has to manage processes, has to be able to manage processes and apply risk concepts. I mean, like people say, well, a risk, you got to mitigate a risk. No, you don't. I mean, you can accept the risk, right? You can accept the risk, but you have to have some kind of action, and you have to look at the severity of a risk, right? And that's how you do the risk. If if you've got past things, that certainly you can look into like the 31000 as well. Any other question, comments?
I have Chaitanya. He raised his hand, so I will
Can you open his mic? Open his mic.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Desmond, for an excellent presentation. I think it helps people to understand how standard is developed. I just wanted to let people know that if you go to CSA website, they are always looking for volunteers to come in and volunteer in standard development. If you have any issues in connecting in one of the standards or anything, let me know and I will try and help you out. But it's a really good experience. I've been doing it for last 15 years at the moment with TC210, now 2C215 on health informatics, and now with the healthcare hospitals, developing standards for how to build hospitals with all the infrastructure. So they take people from all walks of life, different users or SMEs on product or services, as well as community members to provide their input, because all the inputs from different directions especially in Canada, they are looking for the users also. So it's an excellent approach. Thank you.
Thanks for your kind word, Chaitanya and myself, we go back a long way. We used to host all the Toronto seminars, the one-day seminar, the conferences, and we both been around with ASQ for a long time. And he recently did a very good presentation on the same SDGs and the whole social responsibility and everything else. So and risk as well. So it's thanks for that. And yes, there's also ISO. Get on a mirror committee. Start by getting on a mirror committee, networking. I got on, if you want to know my personal story, I got onto these standards through Peter Merrill. He was deeply involved in ASQ Toronto. I've known him for maybe over the past 2 decades. He was chair twice. He does a lot of presentation. He's the innovation group for Canada. Right now, he's representing. He's a leader for the team leader for the work group 1 on the innovation management standard. So working with him, and he encouraged me to take it to the next level. It does require dedication. This is not a fad or thing. I mean, you really have to put the effort in. It's not easy. Imagine going to a different country and sitting down there for 4 days or 5 days, and you've got deadlines to reach, and you want to get through all these comments by the end of Thursday afternoon, and there's 250 comments, and every line is a big debate going on. But it's nice because it really gives you insight on how people across the globe they think differently. My main aim today was, as I said, and I want you to walk away with, have not respect, but really appreciate our work. When you look at the standard the next time, look at it with a different eye. Don't just dismiss it. Don't just say that there's a totally non-value about the work, because you're dismissing the work of so many subject matter experts. It's how you use the standard, and stop with the prescriptiveness. Understand the principles and work it. And I don't, in any organization that I go, you never hear me talking about let's get certified or let's do this or let's do that. I apply the principles. I work it. I look at systems thinking. That's what I do.
I have one question, Desmond.
Yep.
Thank you very much for a very insightful presentation. So if you were to look ahead, is there any particular standard that you think should be implemented in the years to come that is not in place now? Would you like to see a specific standard?
Yeah, well, I would be biased. I mean, personally, we go through the world, and just as the quality ISO 9000 was a big thing, the innovation management standard is the next big thing. Over the years, every politician, every speech you hear, they talk about innovation. It's become such a cliche. It's the same thing like when quality. If you Google quality, you'll find it in so many documents, right? So
Right.
innovation management standard, I think, is going to be the next big thing, because for you to remain cutting edge in globalization, regardless of where you are in the world, you need to have a structure. Let me give you an example, Lorraine. Even in Canada, one of the reasons that CSA is pushing for innovation is, and this may sound like WIFM, not for me, but I mean for the companies. They say, look, we're going to give you a grant of $1.5 million if you can show us that you incorporate innovative thinking within your company, because we see as an innovative company, you will grow and you will thrive, and then we can invest money and give you a loan and then put you on some kind of loan forgiveness. Well, here's the challenge. The federal government, when they get the application, they cannot assess it because people are looking at inventions as innovation, but they don't have a system within their organization to deliver innovation. So if you're a company that can register or get yourself certified to innovation management standard, guess what? When you put in your application, you say, wait a minute, come, you want to audit me, second party, or audit the third party, whatever audit you want to do, here are my results. Here is what I have. You will get that loan. And apart from the loan, you'll be able to drive the economy forward. You'll be able to add value. You'll be able to improve things within the country, because now you're going to get that extra fund or funding to do what you have to do. So this is where this whole this is where innovation, as I see it, I think, and that's one. And the second thing is the quality 4 integration, right, or industry 4 integration.
Right, yeah.
That's very, very important.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Thanks,
I guess so.
Thanks, Lorraine. For asking me to do this presentation. So,
Nikolai, any more? I don't think there are any more questions, are there?
No, I don't see any more questions. There is a question, but we agreed to that one. A copy of this presentation will be sent to the attendees.
Yeah, I will have to clean it a bit because there's some, I got to make sure there's some proprietary information because I did make some mention to some things. If it's available readily, then. It's nice to see that, towards the end, we stuck to about 85 persons the last time I checked. So that's great. Thanks for staying with it. Hopefully, I didn't bore anybody, and, we all think, and, happy World Standards Day. Celebrate it. Think about it. Get up and do something. And I see a lot of familiar faces in here as well.
I just want to add to all our members as well. Thank you very, very much for attending our webinar. And I hope, and our committee hopes to see you at future events, so our section can become stronger with your active engagement and involvement. So thanks very much for attending.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Desmond. Thank
Take
you
care.
for.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.